What if I told you this one rattling 110-year-old machine helped build the American dream? What if this simple black card and just rolled out dirt roads, but completely changed how America moved, worked, and lived? And what if the most important car in history wasn't a roaring V8 muscle car, but a humble 20 horsepower pioneer that barely touched 45 miles per hour? Today, we're stepping inside one of the most important classic American cars ever built, the 1915 Ford Model T, the machine that didn't just transform transportation. It transformed America itself. Take a second and really look at it. The tall, skinny wheels. The brass rim catching the light. The narrow body sitting high like it's ready to conquer mud roads and wooden bridges. This isn't just an antique. This is one of the true early automotive legends, a living piece of American history from a time when roads were barely more than wagon rails and the future felt wide open. Back in 1915, highways didn't exist. Gas stations were rare. Traffic lights weren't even a thought. And yet this machine gave people something radical for its time: personal freedom. When the Model T first arrived in 1908 under Henry Ford, it wasn't designed to impress the wealthy. It was built around one bold idea: create a car affordable enough for everyday Americans. Before that, cars were luxury toys. If you owned one, you were elite. But the Model T flipped the script. It became the people's car. By 1915, America was falling in love with motion. Farmers could reach town in hours instead of days. Families could visit relatives miles away without planning an overnight trip. Workers could live farther from factories and chase better opportunities. For the first time, distance didn't feel permanent. That's why when we talk about vintage classic car stories, this one stands above the rest. This wasn't just transportation. It was the foundation of every classic American car that followed, from elegant cruisers to roaring vintage muscle cars decades later. And here's the part that blows most people's minds. This car only made about 20 horsepower. A simple 2.9-liter inline-four engine. No electric starter to fire it up. You had to crank it by hand, and if you did it wrong, it could kick back hard enough to break your wrist. Driving it? Completely different from today. 3 pedals, but not the way you expect. No modern gear shifter. Throttle mounted on the steering column. A spark advance lever you had to adjust manually. Imagine handing this to someone in 26 and saying, "Go ahead, take it around the block." It was mechanical, raw, unfiltered. And yet millions of Americans learn it. By 1927, more than 15 million Model Ts had been built. Let that sink in. 15 million without robotics, without computers, without modern automation. That's where the real revolution happened. Inside Ford's Highland Park plant, mass production changed the world. Instead of craftsmen building one car at a time, the car moved down a line while workers performed specific tasks. Build time dropped from over 12 hours to around 90 minutes. Costs fell. Wages rose. Workers could afford the very machines they were assembling. It wasn't just smart manufacturing. It was a shift in American industry that still shapes how products are built today. And this 1915 Model T, it's a surviving witness to that turning point. You're not just looking at steel and rubber. You're looking at the moment America accelerated into the modern age. But here's something most people don't realize. The Model T didn't just fit into society. It forced society to adapt. Road systems had to expand. Gas stations had to be created. Traffic laws had to be written. Entire supply chains were born because this car proved mobility could be mass-produced. That's why it remains one of the most influential forgotten legends of us cars, even if people don't always recognize it that way. By the early 1920s, the Model T was everywhere. On farms, in cities, parked outside general stores, lined up outside churches on Sunday mornings. They even gave it in the Traveler Tin Lizzie. Families modified them into pickup trucks. Doctors used them to reach rural patients. Farmers converted them into tractors. Some enthusiasts even raced them. This humble machine quietly sparked American car culture. But nothing stays on top forever. As the 1920s rolled forward, competitors like General Motors began offering cars in multiple colors, smoother styling, and more comfort. Buyers started wanting personality, not just reliability. And Henry Ford resisted change. He believed the Model T was perfect as it was. The same confidence that made it revolutionary eventually slowed its evolution. Sales declined. The once unstoppable icon began to feel outdated. In 1927, production ended. Just like that, the car that helped build modern America stepped aside for the next generation. But here's the emotional twist. It never truly disappeared. Hot rodders in the 1930s and 40s stripped them down and turned them into lightweight speed machines. The legendary T-bucket hot rods? Their roots trace straight back to this platform. The same frame that carried farmers to town later carried racers down drag strips. That's the thing about true early automotive legends. They don't fade. They transform. And when you see a 1915 Model T still running today, still chugging along at 40 miles per hour, it hits differently. It's not about speed. It's not about luxury. It's about legacy. You're hearing the mechanical rhythm that sparked generations of innovation. Every vintage muscle car, every restored cruiser, every rare barn find, every chapter in timeless automotive heritage traces back to this beginning. Before horsepower wars, before chrome and tail fins, before big block engines shook the streets, there was accessibility. There was vision. There was a simple black car that told ordinary Americans they didn't have to stay where they were. And maybe that's why the 1915 Model T still commands respect. It represents risk, industrial courage, belief in mass opportunity, the moment when one bold idea reshaped a nation. Standing next to one today feels less like looking at an old car, and more like shaking hands with history. Because without this machine, the entire story of classic American cars would look very different. And that's why more than a century later it still matters. If you want to see more legendary cars and their stories come to life, make sure you subscribe.